Hello, Sam here from Aldous Systems, and in this video I'm going to be demonstrating VLAN setup using Alta Labs. If you know what a VLAN is, then feel free to skip ahead to the configuration part of this video. However, if you do wish to have a more in-depth overview of VLANs, then I do have a dedicated video which I'll link to in this video. VLAN, or a virtual local area network, allows you to take a physical network switch and partition up the ports into separate logical networks. Normally in a network switch, everything that gets plugged in can all communicate to one another on that network. But with VLANs, you can group devices together in these partitions so they can only communicate to one another within their own logical network, even though they're still connected to the same hardware. This helps reduce any unnecessary traffic, increase performance, increase security, and at the base is to keep host devices separated. So you keep all your IoT devices in one VLAN and all your smart home equipment or general office equipment in a different VLAN. In the commercial world, VLANs are normally used to separate departments. So for instance, HR, finance, sales, management could all be on separate VLANs and all on their own logical networks. So let's go ahead and set this up using my Alta Labs rig. So I'm going to create 3 VLANs: HR, finance, and sales. Now, VLANs do not provide devices with an IP address, a gateway address, or DNS settings. They're literally there to partition the network. Basically, putting a wall up around each department, but with no door or windows to the outside world. To add that door, to get out to the outside world, we need to add a router and create subnets. So I'm going to go to manage.alta.inc and select network and go to the route 10. When I click on that router, the configuration card pops up. I'll go to VLAN and press the add button. And I'm going to create a VLAN 10 and call that HR. Now with subnets, this is where we can determine the gateway address, how many IP addresses are available for host devices, and the DNS servers to be used for that subnet. So the gateway I'll set to be 192.168.10.1. Any host on that subnet will need to have a gateway address automatically assigned via DHCP or statically assigned by the network admin to be able to route out to the internet or route across subnets and VLANs should that be required. Now, Alta uses prefixes rather than full dotted decimal subnet masks to determine how many IP addresses can be allocated. So /24 is your standard 255.255.255.0 subnet mask, and that will allow for 254 host devices on that subnet. A HR department at a small business may only have a handful of staff, so let's say 9 staff work in HR. So I'm going to reduce the subnet mask to allow for 14 host devices. So that would be 255.255.255.240 or a /28 prefix. If you want to know more about subnetting and supernetting, then again, I've got a dedicated video on this. I can switch the DHCP server off to only allow static assignment of those hosts, but I'll leave that on and have 1 IP address available for static assignment. And then I've got 12 DHCP addresses available. So altogether, 14 host addresses for this subnet. 1 address is for the router, 1 available static address, and then 12 DHCP addresses. So we have 14 altogether. I'll set up the DNS, so 1.1.1.1 and quad 9, and then press add. Then we can check in the VLAN drop-down that the HR VLAN is in there. Great. So I'm going to create 2 more subnets for finance and sales. Finance will have the same amount of IP addresses available, and sales will be slightly higher with 50 people. So I need to adjust the subnet mask accordingly. For sales, I'm going to do a /26 subnet. And this will allow for 62 usable host addresses. This will cover our 50 devices. So I'll do 8 static IP addresses and 53 DHCP addresses, just in case they need a few more devices. Set the DNS, and that's done. If I click on the port on my router that's connected to the switch, under the allowed VLANs we can see the 4 subnets. This is our trunk. All VLAN tags are inserted into the frame downstream to the switch. Okay, so on the switch we need to set the ports to place the devices connected to it into those VLANs, and these are called access ports. There's a couple of ways that we can set access ports. We can set up each individual port, which I'll show now. I'm going to select a couple of ports. So in a real install I'd have a bigger switch or additional switches to accommodate the amount of ports that I need. So port 14 for instance, device name, you want to name that according to your network design. So I'll just call it HR computer 1. Set the native VLAN to be 10. So it turns it into an access port, and then remove this port from being a trunk port. So remove the allowed VLANs, and I'll do the same for port 13. I'm going to do the same for the finance VLAN on ports 12 and 11. Now for bigger subnets, say you've got 30 devices on one switch, it'll be a bit monotonous setting up each port. So what we can do with Alta Labs is create a colour and associate that colour to a VLAN and assign that to multiple ports. We can also set rules such as bandwidth restrictions, port speeds, and mess around with quality of service and more as well. So sales, I'm going to click on port 10 and I have this colour group option. By default, it's on black. If I choose blue, and then I'll press the pencil icon to edit what this color does when assigned to a port, I'll set the native VLAN to be 12 and allowed VLANs to be none. So it's an access port and not a trunk port. I press save. Now I can select multiple ports. Let's say 9, 8 and 7. Then under action, I'm going to set the colour and select blue. And that's done. So now I'm going to connect to the switch on the ports associated to those VLANs. So I'm going to go to port 14 now. And I'm now in the HR VLAN. My IP address is in the 10 range. Gateway is 10.1. Subnet mask is 255.255.240. Now if I go into the finance VLAN on ports 11 or 12, give that a test. I'm now in the .11 subnet range. Now we'll connect into the sales VLAN, and I set that up using the color method. When I connect in, I'll go into port 10. I'm now placed in the sales VLAN on the 12 range, and my subnet mask is 255.255.255.192. Then we can create Wi-Fi for each of these VLANs, which I'm not going to do in this video because I've got a dedicated video on how to pass and setting up Wi-Fi networks with VLANs. And that's how you set up VLANs using Alta Labs hardware. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.